Hi, it's Alexander Russo from The Grade, and this is the Education Show. I am so happy to be here today with Georgetown's Nora Gordon, who has an amazing new Substack called Why Is It Like This? Nora, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
For people who might not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and this new Substack?
This is a much harder question than usual. So usually I would be like, oh, I'm a economist. I'm a professor of public policy at Georgetown. The end. I do education policy research. My research focuses, I have a lot of work on federal education finance and Title I. For this, I feel like I'm wearing 500 hats though, because I have my researcher hat. I'm a parent. I'm a parent in MCPS, Montgomery County Public Schools, Maryland. I'm a private school parent. I'm a PTSA volunteer. And actually, then I feel like my teaching comes into this a lot because I'm used to hearing what kinds of questions people have. And also, this is very much informed by my work talking with journalists over the years and hearing what kinds of questions they have.
Great. And we're going to talk about all these things. I'm really interested in everything. Why did you decide to do a newsletter now?
It is probably less intentional than you might imagine. So I'm on sabbatical, which is fantastic for this academic year, and it means I have a lot more time than usual. And I had a kind of change of plan, and suddenly the thing I thought I was going to do, I wasn't going to do,
Right.
and I was looking for a project. And at the same time that I was looking for a project, I was being a parent, and I had many years of not understanding what was going on. And that's kind of the simplest way to put it. I just didn't get it. And it's not just why is it like this? It's almost even what is this? What is this? And then once I can figure out what this is, why is it like this? And so I wanted to figure it out. I actually thought at first that it would be something that looked more like an academic research project. I went through IRB at Georgetown. I thought I'd be doing interviews, and I am doing things that are interviews, but there's a whole question of, is this a research project or what is this? But I decided to do a newsletter because I didn't want to just sit there by myself and write a really long, Word document on my computer. I felt like I needed to hear from people. I needed the back and forth that I hoped Substack would provide, and so far it seems like it is.
Excellent. Well, I know you're just out of the gate, but I'm eager to hear all sorts of things. The stereotype is that suburban parents, frankly, have it all wired, that they know everything, that they know the budget before the principal knows the budget, that they know the policy before the board knows the policy. It sounds like that actually might be an inaccurate stereotype, at least in terms of your experience. Can you talk a little bit about suburban parent knowledge versus suburban parents offshoring the whole operation?
Sure. I'll start by saying MCPS is an enormous district. So there's 160,000 students. I can't remember, it's 14th or 15th biggest district in the country. So whatever I'm saying about MCPS is not meant to be representative of other districts at all. And it has suburban parents, but there's a real mix in MCPS. MCPS is, I believe, 44% free and reduced price lunch right now. So it's not some uniform demographic in MCPS. One thing that's weird about a lot of the parents I know personally in Chevy Chase, who are higher income parents, higher educated parents, they're so into policy. Like they're all kind of policy experts. They're lawyers, they're journalists, they're bureaucrats. Usually not in MCPS, but there are a lot who work in K-12 policy, people who work in foundations. People are used to understanding systems. They're used to like winning the system, or at least being a player in the system.
Right.
And there are parents in MCPS who get the system, some of the advocates. So there is, when you think PTA, or at least what I used to think of as PTA, is school PTA. or PTSA if you're a high school. So MCPS has all of that. And then they have a county level PTA, the MCC PTA, Montgomery County Council of PTAs. They have a monthly meeting with a delegate from each school. They do resolutions, they vote, they have executive committees. They do advocacy around operating budget, around the capital budget, around policy, all of these things. So, I feel like they have maybe 10 or more different committees, special ed, like if you can think of it, they're active. Excuse me. They know how it works. They know what's on the calendar, how the interplay between the board and MCPS and the county council and kind of who needs to be influenced when on what. But most parents don't know that. And kind of some of the things that most parents don't understand, really, it started striking me how little I understood during COVID. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And some kind of basic questions about what I see at school. Is this because the teacher chose to do it this way? Or did someone make the teacher do it this way? And if so, was that a principal or was that a directive from the district? And are they following it or defying it? Or do they just have discretion and just kind of what's even going on?
So just to make sure I understand, is there a district and a county, or is the district the county?
The district is geographically contiguous with the county, but it's a different entity. So Montgomery County Public Schools is an agency.
Right.
Montgomery County is its own thing. And so MCPS has to go to the county council and ask for budget.
Right. Okay. So the county is a much more active or influential layer of governance than it might be in another school system where there isn't a contiguous geographic arrangement, or where the county just is a rubber stamp.
Yeah. So this all was like kind of weird to me when I moved to Maryland. Even, I study this, so I knew these arrangements existed, but I grew up in New Jersey. The action is, township or city there. Then you have other parts of the country where it'd be like multiple towns in one school district. There are district lines that cross counties. There's some crazy district that's in both Vermont and New Hampshire. You see all different arrangements. And so I think, actually, when I think about readers for this, I am primarily writing for an MCPS audience, but I think I'm trying to write about it in a way such that people who live somewhere else would realize, oh, this is the thing I need to figure out in my place.
Exactly. I wanted to ask about that. Before we jump into the newsletter and journalism and everything else, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what the issues that Montgomery County Public Schools are or should be addressing? Are we talking about enrollment and choice and algebra and literacy? What are the hot topics?
Everything but choice. We don't have choice. There's one charter school that opened this year. It was the first charter school in MCPS, and I can't remember if it's officially about to close or it's unofficially about to close.
Right.
And it seems like we're not going to be getting those tax credits because we're in Maryland. So the absence of choice, I think, should be part of the story. But the kind of hot topics, all those national things that you mentioned are going on here. And then the things that people sort of, I know what readers want to read about, what everybody's talking about. And that's why I led off with a post on regional programs, which is about these kind of a regional model for special academic programs at the secondary level. So if you want to do a STEM program, you are not going to travel across the entire county to have to get to it in high school. A very hot topic this year is boundary studies. And that's true in so many years because it's such a big county. And then, they're renovating schools, they're building schools, they're closing, so people are really worked up about boundary studies, which makes sense. I mean, I've been through the 2 boundary studies as an MCPS parent, and people care. People say, like, I bought this house for this school and this is my expectation. And people really get mobilized around that. I think it sucks up all the air, and then people aren't paying attention to the fundamentals that you just said, kind of on the academic side. Why is there no curriculum in high school? How are we doing our staffing? How are we planning ahead for enrollment decline? How are we getting our fiscal house in order?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to blame any parents who are busy with the boundary concerns, because that's top of mind and that's visible, and all this other stuff is less visible, but I
Right.
think it's a real challenge.
Right. And one of the other issues that can get left to the side, for better or worse, is equity or inequality between of outcomes for different kinds of kids or different parts of the. I don't know whether MCPS is part of that suburban equity consortium that used to be active. The Evanston, and a few other places we're doing this. Evanston, Shaker Heights.
I don't know, but I'm interested. MCPS
There,
talk.
there used to be a national equity focused suburban district consortium. There also used to be, I don't know if it's still active, and you probably know this better than I do. There also used to be a consortium of big county school systems. They got together, I don't know, 20 years ago and said, hey, some of our issues are slightly different than smaller suburban districts or big city school districts. The big city school districts had Great Cities. I don't know if Great Cities is still operating.
They are, and MCPS is not in it.
Right. So this was like the Great Cities for big county, sort of Gwinnett for big county districts. It may be defunct. It was a spin-off or a side project of AASA. But it's an interesting thing because there are so many of these kinds of districts, and they've got distinct issues.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that these issues are really specific. Like, MCPS is organized around clusters. So a high school and all the schools that feed into it. There's 26 high schools in MCPS. So the district I grew up in, New Jersey, was one high school. It was like 1/26 of MCPS. They also had one superintendent, one CFO. It's kind of bananas thinking about this. I don't know about MCPS membership in those groups, but two things I'll say. One is, many people have told me that they feel MCPS is quite insular and not kind of comparing itself to how other districts do things. And sort of, we've always done it this way. Right. So that makes me think that, I don't know if they're in these in these consortia. And if they are, I don't know how much it's penetrating the strategy that the district is taking. The other point is, in terms of equity, MCPS talks an enormous amount about equity. And it's really frustrating to watch the way they talk about it, because it's all about differences in resource allocation. And none of it is kind of about the core. So, for example, like I said, that there's not, secondary curriculum in English language arts. I think that's an equity issue. But the way people talk about equity in MCPS is much more about things that are going to particular schools and gaps for groups.
And gaps for groups. So are people looking at how the kids at the 26 high schools are being served, or what they're learning or able to demonstrate by the time they leave? Is that kind of a conversation happening? Or is it all about dollars going in?
I don't want to say definitively, because truthfully, I really did not follow MCPS before I started this sabbatical. I kind of started digging this, I don't know, June, when I decided this is going to be my project. And So there is so much history. People have been working for so long
Hmm.
uh, on MCPS, and I am, talking to different people, including people who were active in the past, to get a sense of that. But I'm kind of watching the board meetings as they unfold,
Hmm.
but I'm not going back in time
Hmm.
because there's so many board
Yeah,
meetings.
exactly. That would kill you. What's it like so far in terms of reader response? What's it like so far as a researcher with a new uh, focal area? You're doing something very public um, in terms of NCPS. You're not just a parent or an academic who someone might call for information somewhere along the way. You're doing a thing. What's it been like to the extent that you can tell so far, sort of going public with this?
Doesn't feel super public, um, which is weird because obviously it is. It's on the internet and anybody can read it.
Yeah.
So it feels very friend of a friend.
Okay.
That I feel like is how it's being passed on.
Hmm.
So I'm hearing a lot from people I know.
Okay.
It's very exciting when I hear it from people I don't know.
Yeah.
And I love that. And then they give me ideas for things I didn't know about, especially
Mhm.
hearing from some people. Um, so many like ed think tank types of people who are new parents in MCPS. So they have early elementary kids.
Right.
And those questions, I just don't even remember.
Mm.
My kids are older. So, someone wrote in with a question about how are you supposed to even report your child's absence to school?
Right.
I don't know that piece of information.
Right.
This coming from somebody who is very skilled at finding information. And I
Mm.
asked my friend at some other school, and she said something different than my school. And like, what are we even supposed to be doing?
Right. What I
Um,
hope what I hope happens next. I ran a blog because that's what we called Substack 25 years ago. I ran a blog about the Chicago public schools for about 10 years. Excuse me. And one of the best parts was when people from inside the system started asking questions or answering questions that I had asked or that someone else had asked. This was back in the days where you could comment anonymously. One of my most prolific commenters, who turned out to be someone in the building in the central office, was called Silver Dart. This person came up to me years later at a conference and said, "Oh, by the way, that was me." But at the time, it was anonymous. The exchange of information between a massive bureaucracy, uh, in your case, spread over an enormous, well, in Chicago's case too, spread over an enormous amount of area. Um, Half the time, it was people on one floor asking questions and people on another floor trying to answer them or saying, "No, you're wrong." And also, in terms of sort of what happens next, I hope, and I'm guessing that you would hope as well, people start to have thoughts and feelings about what you're saying about the system or about how it does operate or how it could operate. It could be very, very exciting. I'm excited about it, at least. I hope that's what happens next.
and thank you. I really would love for that to happen next. I do have, kind of at the end of every post, I have this exit ticket, and I encourage people to contact me. So, it's Substack, they can just reply to the email if they're reading it as an email. And I've also set up an anonymous Google form if anybody wants to leave anonymous feedback for me. I don't feel like I have it in me to moderate comments on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do kind of wonder, you know, if it's too bad kind of losing something in terms of the commenters getting to see each other.
Mm-hmm. Why is the Montgomery County is not a place I think of as a news desert. Generally speaking, in terms of the journalism, the outlets that are there or nearby, or in particular in terms of education, why is it that a Substack like yours is needed or complements what's already going on? Since there's, to my eyes at least, from far away, there's already so much going on in terms of coverage.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think it's a news desert. I was listening to your interview with the person doing the podcast on Boston public schools and their meetings,
Mhm.
and that was kind of shocking to me, actually, how little coverage they were getting. Um, it's not news what I'm providing much of the time, and I have the sense that what the journalists so what we have here, the Washington Post has someone who covers MCPS and also covers some other districts in Maryland,
Right.
Nicole Asbury, and I don't know if I'm describing her beat completely. Um, Talia Richmond is at the Montgomery Banner, and she is MCPS is her whole job.
Right.
So that's great. And then there's this Bethesda Today, and they have a print magazine.
Mhm.
And uh, Ashlyn Campbell is there, and she covers MCPS and other things, other local news. But if you go to an MCPS board meeting, you will see multiple journalists sitting, at their press table. So that's great. But I think what they are writing about is kind of what happened,
Right.
like what is the news part of the news story. And in my experience talking with journalists, often, they come and they have a question, and I feel like my job is to tell them what the question should be, or, what they don't know to ask about.
Okay.
And so
Then.
that kind of context, both kind of historical, policy, legal, providing that
Mhm.
is what I see as a big part of it. And also um, just kind of more analytical. Like I can't stop being an economist when I'm writing this, even though I don't want to do it in a jargony way.
Mhm.
Um, so
And what's an example? Maybe it's something we've talked about already, but what's an example of a issue that's incredibly important to the lives of kids and the life of the community and the school system that isn't news, uh, that isn't breaking, that wouldn't attract a journalist's attention, but is deeply, deeply important?
So one thing that I've been thinking about writing, I don't know if it will be in time for this budget cycle, is about class size reduction.
Okay.
And so we're in the thick of operating budget season in MCPS and in many districts. And the way they talk about it, it's sort of there's the base,
Hmm.
which is everything you have to do, everything that you state, federal law, and all of your contractual obligations that you have to spend.
Hmm.
And then you have additional discretionary, non-discretionary. I don't even know how non-discretionary is different from base. I need to go into this spending. And so there's kind of no discussion. It's all about the changes. It's not about what if we're doing the same thing again and again. And going back to the equity conversation, there's a lot of discussion about what should class size be. Our superintendent has said that enrollment decline is a great time to reduce class size,
Hmm.
which is true if your goal is to have smaller classes and not eliminate jobs. I don't know, fiscally, it's not clear that it's putting you on track for dealing with the new fiscal realities that are coming from enrollment decline. So just kind of talking about what do we know about class size? And people have this general sense of smaller classes are better for kids, and research shows that. But then, kind of putting some dollar amounts on all of that, I feel like that's really what's missing in a lot of the budget discussions. People are making compelling cases for everything. Everything that's getting cut. You're like, I don't want to take away caseworkers for homeless kids
Hmm.
in MCPS. That sounds awful. But all of this, so far, they've been talking about the discretionary stuff, which is only 10% of the budget. And so something like class size, which will maybe get as much airtime as something that's, a lot less money. So just kind of framing it up as this isn't one of 20 things.
Hmm.
This is 90% of the thing. And how much do you want to, make that? How much do you value that?
So part of what you're hoping to be able to do is to help people see um, which are the biggest apples in the pile, so that things don't get flattened into all being the same size. Am I understanding you
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Because I mean, if you are, I don't know how many people, well, certainly the board and the superintendent
Mm-hmm.
are watching all of these meetings and hearings,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you think about the way the hearings go, the sign up fills up right away. It's the people who are organized who get the slots to present at the hearings. And so there's multiple people talking about a particular thing in a particular school.
Right.
But then you're like, okay, but we have over 100 schools and we only heard about a few of them.
Right.
So what's going on here?
So the impression is skewed. What the board members hear and what the public hears is skewed by the structure of what journalists consider worth covering, and also by what the sign-up procedure has.
Yeah, and also by how MCPS does its presentations. So
Right.
they have their work sessions and their hearings.
Mm-hmm.
And the work sessions is MCPS leadership kind of giving PowerPoints on what they're explaining their proposed budget, their budget, the superintendent's request.
What's your experience so far? You've got this research background. You're starting this new thing. It's fascinating to think about. What's your experience so far of trying to understand, get information about MCPS as a entity that you're researching? Is it on the inscrutability or the access spectrum? Where does MCPS appear to be so far?
That's a tough question. I haven't tried so hard to find things that aren't public. I'm kind of interested in what is visible to
Okay.
the public. And honestly, so many people have told me that researchers nationally have told me that it's challenging to get access to MCPS data. Like if you wanted to do some kind of research partnership, there are districts that you'll see tons of research coming out of Chicago, coming out of New York City, coming out of the state of Texas. There are places that do a lot of collaboration. And I think it really benefits those agencies that they have research produced on their context. You see less of that with MCPS. So sort of like if you were a local researcher, probably think, oh, well, DC is part of this whole research collaborative that the
Right.
Urban Institute is running. Maybe it would be easier to go do something in DCPS than in MCPS. So I don't know that they actually have something right now. There was a news item about how they say they need another staff person in central office for the volume of FOIA requests that they're getting. Or I guess, whatever the Maryland Public Records version of that. So that's good. But a lot of what I would like to see, kind of in terms of achievement outcomes and the way they report that stuff at the building level, that's not so much on MCPS as it is on the state of Maryland and
Right.
how they do their school report card and their kind of accountability
Right. And I
framework.
should know this, but I don't. Are there institutions or individuals who are known for having done a lot of research on MCPS or on Maryland? Are there people who have been doing this for years on the research side?
Not really.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, not on MCPS.
What's your experience? You've been an economist focused on education for a long time now. What's your experience of both seeing and being covered by traditional journalism? Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I'm curious about whenever I talk to researchers or practitioners or anyone else, I'm always interested in what they see and also how they felt when their work or their views are depicted.
Yeah, I mean, I really mostly rely on kind of the education press as
Okay.
opposed to other things, so
Mhm.
I always read Matt Barnum's work. Like I look at Edweek, I look at Chalkbeat, and then I look at the MCPS stuff. And then, I'll see like big national stories.
Mhm.
And I value that, it's interesting to to have some more granular context.
Mm-hmm.
When I speak with journalists for a story, I most prefer kind of the background part. I feel like often the things that I feel like I'm adding the most value on are things that are not like a research finding. It's more just kind of explaining how a system works, which I guess explains part of why I'm doing the Substack this way.
Exactly. Yeah.
People have a lot of questions about federal programs and what's the role of the state in administering them. So I enjoy being able to provide that context. And I appreciate the storytelling that you see in journalism, but I also think it's really hard because there'll be kind of one story, and then you think, oh, but there's all these data points, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just one story.
So the focus on individuals or on narrative is frustrating to you. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's not frustrating, but it's I just often wish that there would be more context to kind of get a sense of how typical is this individual narrative.
Right. So and so doesn't like a school cell phone ban. Where do they fit into the rest of their counterparts, or where does the school's cell phone ban fit into the context of school cell phone bans in other places? I don't know why I picked school cell phone bans, but am I
Yeah.
understanding the issue that you're describing?
Yeah. Or like a story starts because there's some advocacy group that puts out a statement,
Mm-hmm.
and who is not organized into an advocacy group and didn't put out a statement and prompt a story.
Right.
And so that kind of goes back to what is newsworthy
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of what can local education journalists be getting approved by
Mm-hmm.
their editors. But it's sort of like, oh, well, if there's a statement, then it's thing happened and we can cover it.
Are the insights that you share, I'm not sure if you're sharing them on the record or not, but are the insights that you share, the time you spend, talk to a lot of journalists about this, it's interesting to hear what they have to say, is what you're communicating um, integrated into the story that you see by and large, or are these contextual insights or are these analytic points left edited out or not included?
I do not usually see them in the story. And that's okay with me.
Is it?
I view it more as I'm kind of investing in the education of a journalist by having this conversation, and maybe that's shaping other things, but I kind of feel like by the time I'm talking to them, they're on deadline. They kind of need a quote, and so my quote is usually so boring, it's like about the 10th Amendment, or it's like something
Yeah.
they did not need an expert to say.
My worst experience as a journalist was talking to Katie Haycock at the Education Trust, and she was frustrated with me, and she said, "Alexander, do you have the quote you need? Can I go now?" And I was like, "Oh, so much for my illusions of finding truth or being a blank slate for her insights." She was feeling, if I understand correctly, I should ask her. She was feeling like I was, going for one thing only, and she was pointing this out to me. Have you had experiences like this?
It really depends, because usually what I've learned over time is I ask them at the beginning, like, what's the status of this? And what I love is someone's like, oh, I'm working on this. This is like kind of a longer term thing. I love talking to someone at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
because then you feel like, okay, maybe you can help frame the direction.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're like, I'm on deadline, can you talk before 3? You're like, okay, then what you need is a quote.
And why is it so hard to, even on deadline, why is it so hard to hard for them to include the contextual information? What's to the extent that you understand, right? You're not a mind reader, neither am I, but why do these contextual and intellectual analytic insights, they sound like they would be valuable to me, but I get the sense that they're not often included. Why are they left out?
This is a very helpful conversation for me. So thank you. This
Okay.
is making me think that what I need to do is have better quotes so that the it's there's so much nuance. It's hard to say this stuff with a word count.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes me a long time to do that. So the way I'm writing this Substack is I'm drafting and drafting, writing paragraphs about something and then thinking about all the conversations I've had with reporters where I would talk, for minutes at a time. And then they say one sentence back to me. They're like, oh, so what you're saying is this? And I say,
Right.
yeah, that actually is what I'm saying. And so I'm trying to then delete several paragraphs and write the one sentence and thinking that, need to be doing kind of more
Well,
of
that's interesting.
that if I know what they're looking for,
Right. There's some researchers that I've talked to who talk in what dismissively would be called in talking points.
Yeah.
They have figured out the most compact, elegant, and frankly compelling ways to say what they want to say. They're not viewing the conversation between the journalist and themselves as a authentic conversation. They're trying to deliver these compelling sound bites, and it's both jarring because it feels like you're not really talking to a human being, but it also is effective because they figured out the sentence. I don't know if they're memorized it or they're reading it.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting and helpful skill, and I'm guessing that it has a ability to get into a story the way a thinking out loud
Doesn't.
kind of quote doesn't. The person I'm thinking about who does this is a gun violence researcher. I think his name is James Allen Fox, something like that. And he is constantly being called when there's some awful event that happens. And he is constantly trying to get context into the story. He and I have spoken about school gun violence, which gets enormous amounts of coverage when it happens, but is contextually rare.
Right.
So he's got this imbalanced situation, and he doesn't want to feed the misperception. So he includes context and seems to have prepared in pretty much everything he says.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting because I'm sure he's having basically the same interview over and over.
He's having some version of the same.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't just cover school violence, but I get the sense that he has had some frustrations along the way and realized that he needs to speak to this particular species of smart generalists on deadline with editors who want everything to be juicy. And I'm sure there are others who've done this or are particularly good at it. And I haven't thought about
hard as an academic because, like I fact check everything I write. I want everything to be tight. And so you just get so precise with your language that you don't want to be saying these things. And also you're like always thinking about nuance. And so probably there is no thing where I would go out there and be like, here's the thing. And like, we should do this thing. We should not do that thing. Whereas some people who work on a very specific issue and have come to believe that we really should do this thing, we really should not do this, other thing, and it's very clean. I think it's easier for them to have punchier quotes. And I feel like I'm always in the like, I need thousands of words and all of the qualifiers, and it's frustrating.
Maybe somewhere in between the TED Talk conclusiveness and the 1,000 words, there's a statement that a responsible researcher can make using something like by and large or on the whole or thus far as we know, and then the definitive statement that might get in the story.
I'm writing that down.
Your job or your challenge, not mine, but an interesting one. One last question before I let you go, and thank you so much for talking with me about this. It's really interesting to hear about what you're doing and also about your experiences communicating with journalists. If you were in charge of education journalism for a day or a week or a month or a year, are there things, is there a thing or several things that you would want education journalists and editors assigning stories or approving pitches, or is there anything that comes to mind that you would really ask of this community of people who are trying their best within the constructs of the business that they're in? Is there anything that you would wish for them to know or to do?
Yes, it's so detailed. It takes so long to get all of the institutional knowledge that I would ask for people to stay on the beat for a little while. And I've done some stuff with Education Writers of America. I don't know how that feels for the journalists, that type of membership, how involved they are when they're not at the conference and stuff like that. But thinking about really trying to not have to reinvent the wheel every time and, I almost feel like with writing this newsletter, as I go through, say, 1 year of it, it's going to be a lot of what even is an operating budget and how does this process even work without saying too much about the actual issues in this year's operating budget, and kind of thinking about how people can ease that transition. And I mean, I know EWA has a lot of great explainers and works together with people on that, but I just think about how long I've been doing this and how I still learn so much new stuff all the time, that kind of blows my mind to think, what would I do if I were, you know, like new to this beat? How would I even know where to begin? So I have enormous gratitude for the people figuring everything out, and for the organizations that are trying to, help people come together.
Well, it's great what you're doing. I really appreciate you coming on the show. The Substack is called Why Is It Like This? Nora Gordon, thanks again.
Thanks, Alex.